The evening sky over Denver glowed with the kind of orange-purple haze that made the world feel paused between hope and heartbreak, and Harrison Cole felt every bit of that pause. He sat alone at a table meant for two, in one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, staring at the untouched glass of sparkling water across from him. His blind date, supposedly the perfect match chosen by his well-meaning friends, had cancelled last minute, leaving him looking like a man waiting for someone who would never arrive. To the outside world, Harrison was a 37-year-old self-made CEO known for his cold, collected power. But at that moment, he wasn't a billionaire genius or a ruthless boardroom strategist. He was just a lonely man with far too many silent nights behind him, a man carrying a wound he never spoke about. If you believe kindness deserves a second chance and love can return when we least expect it, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly supports our channel and helps stories like this reach more hearts. Harrison pushed back his chair with a sigh, the weight of years pressing down. His life had been built on discipline, work, and avoiding emotions that reminded him of the girl he once loved, the one he lost too suddenly, too painfully. But as he stood, ready to leave the restaurant and return to his echo-filled penthouse, something caught his eye. Or rather, someone. A young woman entered the restaurant wearing a simple gray coat with the sleeves slightly worn, her dark hair tied into a messy low ponytail, strands falling around a tired but gentle face. Her shoes were scuffed, her hands rough from labor, but she carried the unmistakable aura of someone trying her best to survive each day. And beside her, holding onto her fingers like a lifeline, was a little boy no older than 5. His jacket was slightly oversized, his sneakers faded, but his wide brown eyes sparkled with a curiosity that made the world seem lighter. The hostess approached them kindly, but her apologetic smile revealed the truth. This restaurant wasn't the kind of place people in worn coats and tired shoes were welcomed easily. The mother nodded, as if expecting the rejection, and turned to leave. It was then that the woman finally looked up, and Harrison's world fell apart. He knew that face. Even if time had carved hardship along her cheeks, even if life had dimmed some of her youthfulness, he would have known her anywhere. Julia Parker. His first friend. His first love. The girl who shared lunches with him in the schoolyard, who laughed with him under summer trees, who promised to meet him on the last day before she suddenly disappeared from his life at 16. For a moment, he wondered if his loneliness had begun to blur reality into imagination. Julia didn't see him. She was too busy adjusting her son's jacket, whispering something comforting to him as she prepared to step back into the cold. Harrison moved before he could think, walking straight toward the girl who had once carried his whole childhood heart. The closer he got, the more clearly he saw the exhaustion she tried to hide, the faint shadows under her eyes, the thinness in her frame, the trembling smile she kept for her child. Life had not been gentle with her. And he felt a pang of guilt for ever thinking his loneliness was unbearable. Meanwhile, Julia felt the intensity of someone's presence before she even looked up. When her eyes finally lifted to meet his, she froze. A single breath left her lips as if the past had slammed into her chest. She hadn't seen Harrison in nearly 20 years. She had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways, but in none of them did she picture herself standing in a cheap coat, struggling to pay for dinner she hoped would be special for her son. What neither of them said filled the space between them, questions, regrets, memories, and the ache of what might have been. Harrison invited them to stay, gently insisting the evening didn't have to end with disappointment. Julia resisted at first, but her son tugged her hand, eyes brightened by the warm lights and shiny tables, and she finally agreed. They sat together, and the night unfolded with a quiet tenderness neither expected. The boy, whose name was Micah, instantly bonded with Harrison. Every time the child spoke, Julia watched with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. She had raised Micah alone for 5 years after leaving a relationship that broke more than her trust. She worked 3 jobs, nannying, cleaning offices at night, and occasionally doing laundry for neighbors, to cover rent in a small studio apartment. Harrison listened without judgment. He asked no intrusive questions. Instead, he treated Micah with the kind of patience that made Julia's heart soften in ways she didn't want to admit. She told him only pieces of her story, but he could see the truth through the cracks, the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the dreams she had shelved to survive. Throughout dinner, Harrison's chest tightened with a painful revelation. He had spent years building empires, but none of it mattered in comparison to this moment, sitting across from the girl he never stopped caring for, watching her child smile with the innocence she deserved but never received. As days passed, life gently pulled them back together. Harrison began visiting the daycare where Julia worked as a nanny, claiming he was simply helping with renovations his company sponsored, though everyone could tell the truth. Julia tried to keep her distance emotionally, terrified of attaching herself to a world she didn't belong in, terrified of exposing her son to hope that could be shattered again. But Micah adored Harrison, and Harrison adored every moment spent with the boy. He often brought little books, puzzles, or warm meals, not expensive gifts, but thoughtful touches that showed he paid attention to the small things, things Julia never had time or money to provide. At night, Julia found herself replaying memories of their childhood. The way Harrison used to pick dandelions and hand them to her with a shy smile. The way he defended her from neighborhood bullies. The way he once told her he'd marry her someday, though they were only 10 and barely understood the word forever. Life had stolen many things from Julia. But somehow, it brought back the one person she thought she'd never see again. Still, she kept her guard up. She knew how uneven their worlds were. She had nothing, no money, no stability, no shining future to offer, and she feared being seen as someone seeking comfort in a wealthy man. She had survived heartbreak once, she couldn't risk it again. But Harrison understood her silence. He saw past it. He saw her strength, her resilience, her love for her son. And slowly, gently, steadily, he began to prove with actions what he didn't dare say aloud. The turning point came on a snowy December evening. Julia's landlord had given her notice that rent was increasing. She had cried quietly after putting Micah to bed, knowing she couldn't keep their tiny place. Moving meant losing her daycare job, uprooting her son, and breaking the fragile stability she had fought so hard to build. She didn't tell Harrison. She didn't want his pity or help. But one night, when he visited the daycare and found her wiping tears in an empty classroom, she didn't have the strength to hide it. The truth spilled out in choked words, and Harrison felt something inside him shatter. He knelt beside her, not as a CEO, not as a savior, but as a man who cared too deeply to stand by and watch her crumble. He didn't offer money. He didn't offer solutions. He simply held her hand until she calmed, grounding her with a presence she had long forgotten, the presence of someone who genuinely cared. In the following weeks, Harrison found ways to help without making her feel small. He arranged additional hours at the daycare, sponsored new community programs, and connected her with families who needed reliable childcare. Slowly, Julia began to breathe easier. Slowly, her fear loosened its grip. And slowly, their hearts rediscovered something familiar. One evening, after picking up Micah from Harrison's office, where the boy had become a beloved little visitor, Julia looked around at the warm laughter filling the room. Harrison stood by the window, hands in his pockets, watching her with the same tenderness she remembered from their youth. In that moment, she realized something profound. Love had returned, not in fireworks and dramatic declarations, but in gentle, everyday acts of kindness. In shared laughter. In the way Micah trusted Harrison. In the way Harrison created space for her to feel safe again.